Welcome back, guys. If you've been following me at all on Instagram, you know that I have become a super freak for these little trout jerk baits. Now, pretty much every main JDM manufacturer is producing some form of cool little finesse trout jerkbait because this trend in trout fishing is really blowing up in Japan, and we're seeing it trickle into the US. More and more anglers are getting into this high-tech trout fishing. It's no longer just dropping power bait or throwing a fly. There's this whole new element. And what's amazing about these baits is that they catch so many species of fish. They were designed for trout, but we've been just jacking largemouth and crappie and smallmouth and all kinds of different species. So today we're going to kind of break down these baits for you. We're going to go through the different brands, the different bait offerings, and show you what each one does, talk it through so that you can become a more informed angler. So if you're ready, let's go. Welcome to the Hookup Tackle. The Hookup Tackle is the world's largest showcase of Megabass products, featuring baits and colors not found at any other dealer. The Hookup also offers a wide display of OSP, Evergreen, Depths, Lucky Craft, Jackal, and many more. The Hookup Tackle is owned and operated by family, is staffed by guides and verified tackle nerds who love helping anglers elevate their craft. If you're in the Phoenix area, we'd love to have you stop by our showroom and check out the wonderful world of Megabass and the Hookup for yourself. If you shop online, there are almost 10,000 SKUs of Megabass products alone, with hundreds of other companies and new products being added daily. So next time you're looking for that hard-to-find bait, that color your fish have never seen before, or maybe you just want to elevate your game, look at thehookuptackle.com. Welcome back, my friends. I am Ben Kohler with the Hookup Tackle, aka the Tackle Otaku, being filmed by my buddy Jeffrey the King. We are the Hookup Tackle USA. Today we are talking about one of my new favorite topics, and that is small micro trout jerkbaits. Now, we try to stay on all the trends coming in all fishing, whether it's from the US or Japan, but this is one of those trends that is really exciting for me because I grew up spending half of my year fishing for bass and half of my year fishing for trout here in Arizona. And I grew up fishing small streams, rivers. When I first became a guide, I was an Orvis and Doris fly fishing guide for, over a decade. And trout fishing was one of those things where you were either, this kind of elitist fly fisherman guy, or you're kind of this boogin bait dunker. And there was really no gray area in between. And now with technologies, shit, those trout hooks are sharp, Jeff. Let me try that one again. And now with new technologies, we are seeing a huge, bump in interest and in enjoyment in, light bait casting gear. So BFS gear, sophisticated multi-piece travel rods, high-end reels that are small and built for light line, and most importantly, great tech and new innovation in hard baits and soft baits for trout fishing specifically. Now, the cool thing about the hard baits is that even though these are designed for trout fishing, they totally transfer over into our world of bass fishing. I know a lot of you guys live in places where you stream or river fish for smallmouth. Jeff and I have been spending a lot of time with our buddy Griff over, in some local rivers and areas here in Phoenix, doing some winter largemouth fishing, all on this kind of BFS trout type stuff. So today, we're going to kind of break down each bait and each brand because so many of them are similar, but each one does something a little bit different. So I want to just kind of shed some light on, this whole segment of the market, and I think you guys are going to find it very interesting. And if you're not already doing this kind of stuff, I think you're going to be intrigued to do it as you see the big push coming from Japan into this segment. So let's dive in. So Jeff and I kind of discussed how to kind of break this down. And I think the best way to do it is kind of just walk through each bait as I would choose them. Now, there's no right or wrong here. The right is what they're eating, right? And the wrong is what they're not eating. So I guess there is a right or wrong. Deep thoughts by Ben. But here's how we're going to do it. This is how I go through systematically and choose these baits. And then I just kind of, see what's happening. If I'm catching them right away, if I make the right decision right away, then great. But as you'll see, there's some small little adjustments that we can make on these baits and choosing one from the other that can, you know, help us just kind of go through an entire river chain, you know, whether we're walking or floating in our kayaks or even approach it in still water. So where I usually start is in the Megabass Great Hunting lineup. So I really like the Great Hunting lineup. Obviously, if you guys follow us, you know that I'm a huge Megabass fan. They have spared no attention to detail in their Great Hunting lineup. So Great Hunting is basically their trout lineup. So you'll see here that I'm holding up a X70 and a Great Hunting GH70 Flatside. Now you'll notice that these baits look almost identical, and that's because... Better?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because they pretty much are identical. The X70 is branded as a bass jerkbait, and the GH70 Flatside in the Great Hunting is branded as a trout jerkbait, but really they're the same thing. So they're offered in some different colors, they're offered in some different patterns, but the tech is pretty much the same. So to spec this out, the X70 is 70 millimeters, 3/16 of an ounce, and it's more of a true suspending bait. So this guy can be worked just like a jerkbait, so you can cast it out, you can twitch it just like you would any jerkbait. Now remember, because it's really small, your twitches are going to want to be like super light. You don't jerk the same way you would jerk a Pointer 100 or an Edovision 110, right? It doesn't take a lot of power to get these things to dart and do what they're supposed to do. And remember that the smaller the bait, the smaller the left to right walk is going to be with them, right? So don't expect any of these tiny little baits to have these big, huge movements like we're used to seeing in a larger jerkbait. These can be real subtle, real tight, so just short little twists. Now, one of the reasons why I love the X70 and the GH70 is, of course, it's an easy one to throw at 3/16 of an ounce. So I can throw this on any of my, BFS bait casting gear or my light spinning gear. It does have a weight transfer system. Let's see if I can demonstrate that. So there is a tungsten ball that will go to the back of the bait, which will help aid in the cast. But one of the really interesting things about this bait is it has a very unique channel that goes from the belly to the top. So that tungsten ball has the ability to fall or rise to the top of the bait and fall back down to the bottom. So what happens is as you're twitching this, every once in a while you may give it a little harder twitch than normal, and that ball will bounce up in that chamber and it will cause the bait to do something super erratic. And it's an amazing trigger mechanism. So if you're finding that your fish are a little lethargic, they're not actively chasing bait, a lot of times they may follow your jerkbait in and see it, and then all of a sudden you give it a pop and that tungsten ball shifts up and the bait does something totally unexpected and the fish grab it. So it's just a great starting point for still water and current. It's heavy enough to cast easily. It's a small profile, as you can see. So it's just a very simple place to start, and this is usually my starting point. These guys come with traditional round bend trebles, so they're very easy to replace. You can throw an Owner ST36 on there, replace it very simply. So definitely consider throwing this guy, whether it's in the Great Hunting lineup or the X70 lineup. It's just a great one to have in your arsenal. From there, I usually will drop down to the Great Hunting, again, kind of staying in that flat side, but I will drop down to the Great Hunting Flatside 50. So they make a 45, a 50, and a 70 in the Great Hunting Flatside. So for me, the 70 is usually my starting point just because it's more of a traditional jerkbait. The 50 for me is usually my next drop down. Now, the 50 is available in both a fast sink and a float, and it's the same with the 45. So you guys are just gonna have to choose your profile based on how small of a bait you want to go, right? So these guys, even though they look like a jerkbait and they can be twitched if you are very, very careful, really this is more of like a swimming jerkbait. It's more of a hybrid. So what I find is that this is a guy where I'm going to cast it out, and if it's a floating version, it's going to float, and then as soon as I start winding it, it's going to dive down maybe a foot or two. If it's a fast sink version, when I throw it out, it's going to actually sink down pretty quick, about a foot a second. So if you guys are fishing current, if you're fishing streams, and you're trying to throw a bait in there that's actually going to get down in the water column and be able to stay moving in that current, the fast sink is an amazing option. Now, you'll notice at first glance that it has these crazy kind of wide gap barbless treble hooks on them. Right? Now, these are designed to, not hurt the fish, right? They're designed for trout so that they're not going to tear a trout's mouth. Trout's mouth are delicate. They're kind of like Jeff, right? They don't like all those barbs. But what we have found over the last several months of fishing these for bass is these hooks are amazing at pinning fish. So the barbless thing doesn't make any difference. You really don't lose fish on these hooks. The shape of them just gets them. Now, if there's a downside to these hooks, they're incredibly light wire, okay? So you have to be very, very careful when you're unhooking a fish, when you're fighting a fish, to make sure that you're not putting too much power on it because they will snap. And if they snap, you can replace them with traditional round bend trebles. A small owner like a size 12. Megabass is going to make us a special batch of replacement hooks so we can get those to you guys because I've become such a big fan. Now, back to the action of this guy. You'll notice that the shape of it is a little unique. It's got a little thinner head at the front and then it widens out a little bit. This is to give it stability as it moves through the water. So most of the time with this, I'm throwing it out and I'm just kind of doing a straight retrieve and fishing it more like a crankbait than a jerkbait. And it will have a big kind of flash side to side with it. Now, if I want to give it a jerking motion, what I find is that I can impart it with my reel by just kind of giving it a wind and let it kind of, dart off that way versus giving it hard jerks. Because those hooks are so big and the bill is so small and the overall package is so small, if I jerk too hard, the whole thing kind of rolls on itself. So I try to do all the action with this guy with the reel. But it's great for a straight retrieve, great for that intermittent kind of wind. I think you guys are really going to dig this. So this is the Great Hunting 45 or 50, depending on what you need. And I base it less on size because if you look at a 45 versus a 50, I mean, there's a difference, obviously, of 5 millimeters, right? But it's not a huge size difference, right? So for me, I'm basing it more on the weight of the bait, right? So my BFS setup, the way I prefer to fish this, it's just way easier to cast like a 2 to 4 gram bait than it is like a 1 gram bait. So in that 50 millimeter size, the sinking is 4 grams, the floating is 2.5 grams. I could throw both of those super easily with no frustration. When you start going down into some of the smaller baits, they're just getting really light. Like that 45 is 1.7 grams. So that can be hard sometimes to throw on a bait casting gear. And you really need to switch over to like light spin. Okay, so just keep that in mind with the weight. Now, to just point out a couple other options in the Great Hunting lineup, just so you guys are aware, they do make a GH48 dive. Now, this is their slow floating kind of dive version. This is really more of a true crankbait, but again, you can work it like a jerkbait, doing the same idea, with your reel handle where you just kind of turn and give it, short little twitches like that. It does have that little weight transfer system, and it does have that chamber that goes from the belly to the top where that little tungsten ball has an opportunity to kind of bounce up and create little weird actions that trigger strikes. So this guy is really designed for fishing still water. So if you guys are fishing lakes, ponds, that kind of stuff, and you need a really small offering, this is a great addition. It's really, if you're throwing on a light line, like 2 to 5 pound fluoro, you can get this guy down effectively like 6-7 feet. So, maybe add that in if you guys are fishing still water, small baits, that's a good option. And then they also make their Great Hunting GH55 heavy duty. Now this guy is a rounder version. It comes in a sink or a float. This guy is really more of a true kind of flashing bait. It's because it's round, it's really just going to kind of move like that, very tight. It's not going to have a lot of side to side movement. It's going to pretty much be in line with tight little motions. So just a different look if you're looking to just mix it up a little bit from Megabass. All right, for me, the next place I usually go if they're not eating one of those Great Huntings is in one of the staples of the Japanese trout fishing scene, and this is the Lucky Craft Pointer 65, or as it's known in Japan, the Bee Freeze 65. Now, the 65 size of pointer has literally been a staple for well over a decade as one of the best fish catching jerkbaits for trout in Japan. And a lot of guys here in the US have utilized this guy for trout fishing, as well as all the predatory species that we talked about earlier in the episode: largemouth, smallmouth, crappie, all those kind of things. The Pointer 65 looks just like all their other pointers that I'm sure you guys are familiar with. It's just 65 millimeters, so it's 3/16 of an ounce, so it's definitely downsized, but it's a large enough, heavy enough bait that you can cast it easy on pretty much any of your gear. The Pointer 65 is a true suspend jerkbait, and it's a little bit thicker than the Great Hunting 70, right? A little shorter, but a little bit thicker, to where you can actually give it a little more powerful jerks and a little more powerful rips than you can that X70 or the Great Hunting 70. So if I want something a little more erratic, a little more aggressive, if I'm trying to really trigger a strike and bring the fish to the bait, the Pointer 65 is a great one. What's also cool about the 65 is that it does come in like a deep diving version as well. So you can get the same action in a longer lip. So if you wanted to fish the bait down into, 4 to 6 feet instead of keeping it in that 1 to 4 foot, you have some options there. Now, if you guys are going to get into the Pointer 65, keep in mind again that there is the US version, but there's also these amazing colors in the Japan version, which is called the Bee Freeze 65, including my favorite color in the whole lineup. This is Sanketsu Wakasagi. So, it's the same bait, just different packages, different names. So experiment with it. I think you guys will really like this for more of a traditional jerkbait offering. Now, Lucky Craft also makes a trout-specific jerkbait, and this is the Humpback Minnow 50 SP. So this guy is going down in size from the Pointer 65, which I will show you here, to the Humpback Minnow 50. So you can see it's a substantially smaller bait, right? This guy is going to weigh 1/8 of an ounce, so it's still heavy enough to toss on all of my gear. But what's nice about this guy is that it is a true suspend bait. So it's one of the smallest true suspending jerk baits that I carry in my arsenal. So when they're really, really picky on size, I can still fish a traditional jerk bait like this guy and have it suspend without sinking or floating, so you can give it those long pauses. Now, the only downside to the Humpback Minnow, the Pointer 65, there is no weight transfer system. So you're really going to have to dial in your cast, especially when you go to this lighter size. The upside is there's no sound either. So when they get really, really picky and really, targeted on tiny little bait and the water's really clear, the Humpback Minnow can be a great option to get them. All right, next up in my lineup, especially for stillwater fishing, is the OSP Durga 73 SP. I was thinking about beer already. I guess I should focus on the task at hand. Is the OSP Durga 73 SP. Now, this guy isn't technically a trout jerkbait. This is really just kind of a downsized bass jerkbait, but it's so small. I mean, we're only talking about, I believe it's like 4 grams. Yeah, 4.7 grams. So this isn't something that most bass guys are normally going to be able to throw. So it's similar in size, obviously, to the X70, similar in weight to that, but this guy just has a little different action, get a lot of motion out of it. So this guy is going to be less of a, crankbait jerkbait hybrid, more of a true jerkbait. So when I want a slender, more bait fish type profile, especially like after spawn, and they get that kind of long, skinny body, some of the river systems we fish have this bizarre bait that's like long and thin. I know a lot of you guys that live, Wisconsin and Minnesota and stuff have, different species of longer, thinner bait versus taller, fatter bait like threadfin and that kind of stuff. This can be a great option. It does have a dual tungsten weight transfer system in it that will shift to the back and then kind of lock in place with a magnet as it shifts, so it casts great. It does have a little bit of a knock in there. So as it moves, you will get a little bit of sound, but it's not an overwhelming amount of sound. So this is just a great option. Again, really works best in still water conditions, so ponds, lakes, maybe, you know, a pool in a river if you guys are fishing. But if there's any really true current, it doesn't have enough to really fight the current and get down, and it just kind of wash out. So definitely consider it. If you guys are fishing a lot of still water, you guys will love it. I think you'll be really happy with it. That's the Durga from OSP. Now, another one that I have added into my arsenal recently, mainly because in doing a lot of my research and talking to a lot of the anglers over in Japan, this is a bait that's come up over and over and over again as being one of their favorites, and one that I really had never paid attention to, but I can attest now that it's an amazing little bait. This is from Ima, Japan. This is the Ima Eisen 45S Max. Now, this is a 45 millimeter sinking bait. It does weigh 4 grams, so you get that shorter body that you could get in the great hunting, but at almost twice the weight, so it casts very, very easily. Now, if you guys are familiar with Ima, you'll know that they make a lot of products designed for the US market that are made, you know, in China, and they brought here, and they're relatively cheap, but they also have a very strict made in Japan line as well, and this is part of that made in Japan line. So they're going to be beautifully precise in their actions, bait to bait. It's got a very unique shape. It's very thin and very tall. So what this guy does is this guy flashes crazy side to side so fast. It vibrates so fast that underwater it almost looks like 2 lures or 2 bait fish in one. So it just creates this crazy illusion as it's moving through that there's multiple fish there that draws strikes. This guy is difficult to fish as a jerkbait, even though it is kind of technically still in their jerkbait lineup, because it's a pretty fast sink. So definitely think of this as more of a true, you know, kind of throw out and either just straight retrieve or kind of really varying your retrieve. So it's giving the flash, sinking, giving the flash, sinking, giving the flash, sinking, depending on if you're fishing current or still water. But if you're looking for a great option that can stay in the current, can maintain its posture, and just gives a beautiful side-to-side flash, the Eisen 45 S Max is amazing. I think you guys are definitely gonna love it in the arsenal. All right, and of course, no trout jerkbait episode would be complete without mention of the Duo Realis Spearhead Ryuki line. And actually, I should say the Duo Japan Spearhead Ryuki line. So often here in the US, we think of Duo as being Duo Realis, but actually it's just Duo. And Realis is their bass brand. Their Spearhead Ryuki is their trout brand. Now, these have been a staple for ages and ages in Japan. It's one of the best made, you know, trout jerkbaits on the market. They're incredibly balanced, and they're in a huge range of sizes and colors. So they have them anywhere from a 30, a 40, a 50, a 60, a 70, you know, an 80, all the way up, right? So you can really, you know, fine tune your size offering. They also are available in both a sink. So if you see like 70S, that's going to be their sinking version. They're also available in a float. So if you see like 50F, that is the float version. And the Spearhead Ryuki is just a straightforward, you know, no nonsense fish catcher, right? So they're easy to cast. The sinking ones sink, and they have different chambers in the body to keep their posture perfect during retrieves in currents. If you guys are fishing a lot of streams and rivers, this would be a great one to add. It is a relatively flat bait, so if you just want to cast and retrieve and you can't quite jerk it, that's fine. It's going to have a lot of beautiful action to it, beautiful flashing top to bottom, but it is also designed that you can twitch it and jerk it like a jerkbait as well. So just a lot of versatility to this, and again, tons of colors. A lot of them are more like just generic overall, maybe bass or freshwater colors. Ayu, Tennessee shad, you know, river bait, wakasagi. So they're not specific trout colors. And then others are more designed for trout, right? So they have like rainbow trout, red belly, yamame, you know, that type of stuff, right? So a big variety there. There's also a MDF version that's got a little bit deeper lip to it. So if you wanted to get something down more into that 4 to 6 foot zone, you could with this. There is also the Spearhead Ryuki Takumi version, which is a more rounded version. So it's gonna just have a lot of like straight wobble to it versus side to side movement to it. So there's a lot of options in that lineup that are always great to have on board. Now, getting back to some of the more traditional bass branded stuff in the Realis line, there's also the Rozante jerkbait lineup. Now, even though this is technically in the bass lineup, this is really one of our best selling trout jerkbaits or smaller jerkbaits for, you know, bass guys. And this is available in a 63 SP and a 77 SP. So the 63 is going to be 63 millimeters long, obviously, 77 millimeters long. This is a true suspending jerkbait. One of the great things about the Rozante is that it comes in all kinds of patterns that are specific to kind of freshwater lakes and still water. Perches, wakasagis, you know, all the, you know, trout type patterns. This guy has a magnetic weight transfer system that will lock in place. So on the cast, it will shift to the back so you get these bullet casts, and then as soon as you start the retrieve, it locks into place, and then it's pretty much silent after that. So you get the advantage of a silent bait while still being able to cast it a mile. So if you guys are looking for some alternatives for your still water fishing, you know, I can't emphasize enough, the Rozante is an amazing one. It's in all the right sizes. If you're looking for something for your, you know, creek and river stuff, then definitely check out the Spearhead Ryuki line from Duo. All right, guys, that is a wrap. I hope that was insightful and enjoyable. I really hope if you guys haven't brought these baits into your arsenal yet, that you'll take the time to at least explore them. I think it's going to open up maybe a different world than what's been opened up to you in the past. Of course, if you have any questions on anything that we've covered, drop it down below in the comments section. Jeff will leave links to these products in the description. And until next time, guys, thank you so much for your business. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching. And we will see you soon. And, Jeff, we should do a BFS video breaking down rods, reels, line. Let's do that.
I like that idea.
Okay, so we will come to you with a whole separate video showing you the gear that we use to throw this stuff, how to properly fish it in the water. So look for that to come. We'll do that in the next few days. So maybe in the next couple weeks we'll get that out. So until next time, peace out. Thanks, guys.